Welcome to Well Told Tales, the Pulp Fiction podcast. We're a little bit tardy with this episode, so to make it up to you, we've got a special bonus. After our main story, stick around, we'll have a promo for our friends over at the Dial P for Pulp podcast, and after that, a second mini-story for your enjoyment. We hope you like it, and we'll try harder to stay on schedule going forward. We do have a bunch of great stories in the bank, and some people helping us to sort through them all and read them, so we should be a little bit more punctual going forward. We hope you enjoy the stories, and even if you don't, please stop by welltoldtales.com to give us a rating and leave a comment. Thanks.
The Lure of Heaven by Kevin Anderson. Read by Kevin Colligan. The voice wound its way through the darkened bedroom as Karen opened herself up to its message. Soothing and gentle in its vibrations, it cradled her in an angelic brace. She had heard the same voice in her dreams now for the third night in a row, but this dream seemed more intense than the previous two, more resonant, clearer this time. It sounded as though the speaker were in the room, instead of perched high up in the heavens as it was before. Only when the voice dissipated did she grasp why this one was different. This time, she was awake. She was sitting up in her bed with her arms outstretched toward the ceiling, towards heaven. She didn't remember raising her arms, but up until a few moments ago, she also thought she was asleep. Bringing her arms down slowly, she felt warmth so deep it gave new energy to her spirit. "Thank you," she praised the voice. "Thank you." Karen's husband stirred to consciousness as the bedroom light awakened him 6 hours prematurely. When Michael's eyes started to focus, he could see Karen throwing on clothes. He looked over at the alarm clock and read the time, 11:42 p.m. "Karen," Michael said, "what in God's name are—" "I understand, Michael, I understand," Karen said, bending over to put on her shoes. Michael sat up. "You understand what?" "The dreams," Karen said, enthusiasm growing with each word. "Only they aren't dreams. At least tonight wasn't. Maybe the other two weren't either. I don't know. But I know what they mean." Karen finished tying her shoes and started to move toward the door. Michael was uncertain if he was awake enough to leap out of bed and prevent his wife's exit, but he managed it, stumbling only once on his own slippers. Placing his hands reverently on Karen's shoulders, he said, "Slow down, Karen. Now, tell me what you think the dreams mean." Michael was well aware of Karen's dreams, as they had spent the past 2 days talking of nothing else. "They're about understanding, Michael. I know now why we never had children." Michael seemed taken aback by the remark, as Karen continued. "All my life, I've always known that God had a higher purpose for me, that I was put here to do something for the Lord. We never had children because that would interfere with my true destiny, my calling." Michael responded in a tender voice. "We never had children because I'm sterile, sweetheart." "And who made you that way?" Michael sighed, knowing where her faith-based reasoning was going. "God did," she continued. "Remember when we thought that God was punishing us by making us childless? Now I know that it was all a part of the plan." "What plan?" "God's plan for us, Michael. I've been chosen." "Chosen for what?" "To do something divine, to do his work." "Can you be a little more specific?" "I don't know exactly what I'll be doing for him, but I know where it all begins and when. And where and when is that?" With absolute determination in her voice, Karen said, "Kettleman's Clearing at midnight. Get dressed. We have less than 15 minutes to get there." Michael let his hands fall from her shoulders and focused on the absolute joy in his wife's eyes. He had seen this look before, but never as intense. He knew that if Karen believed the Lord wanted her to stomp around in the woods at night, there wasn't a force in heaven or on earth to prevent her from the pilgrimage. This wouldn't be the first holy or divinely inspired journey for the couple, but it would be the shortest. Kettleman's Clearing, so named for the family that burned to death in their house on Christmas morning, was nestled about 300 yards past a thicket of woods behind Karen and Michael's two-story barnyard-style home. As he had been in the past, Michael was prepared to journey with his wife wherever her beliefs took them. Several years back, when Karen read that a young girl had discovered the image of the Virgin Mary in her pink cotton candy, the young couple had driven more than 10 hours so that Karen could say a prayer over the Blessed Confection. And only last year they had flown to Minneapolis to view a bedsheet at a laundromat. It had come out of the dryer with scorch marks that made the sheet hauntingly resemble the Shroud of Turin. In both instances, Karen believed she was getting the calling, but each time she walked away disappointed. The disappointment never shook her face, though, not even for a moment. That was one of the things Michael loved about her unshakable devotion to her spirituality, no matter how disappointing it sometimes was, made Michael feel special just to be around her. On some level, even he thought she was blessed in some way. "Okay," Michael said, "just give me a minute to put some shoes on." Michael jumped into his sneakers and pulled his robe off the bathroom door. A minute later, the couple was carving a path through the woods behind their house, with only a single flashlight to chase away the darkness. Although there was a full moon, a blanket of clouds masked the satellite's full brilliance, reducing it to a soft glow watching overhead. "I don't mean to question your interpretation," Michael said, while moving some tree branches out of Karen's path. "But why do you believe it was the voice of our Lord calling to you?" "It's not the voice of the Lord exactly. It's his messenger, Enoch. Oh, Michael, I wish you could have heard it." "Wait a minute." Michael held up a hand across Karen's chest, blocking her path. "His messenger? You never mentioned that before." "It was only revealed to me tonight, as was this meeting. We will do the Lord's work through Enoch." I don't understand," Michael said. Karen brought a hand up to her cheek. "I know, babe. That is why I wish you could have heard the messenger's voice. Then you would not question." "But why a messenger and not... God always speaks through divine prophets. Moses, Isaiah, Abraham, even his son. And we will be the next apostles walking with Enoch when the next chapter of the good book is written." Michael wanted so desperately to believe. Faith was never his problem. The need to understand was. "How can you be sure the voice is divine, that it's true?" Karen smiled wide. "Remember when I told you the story of when I was a little girl and I died? When you fell through the ice? I was revived after almost 10 minutes underwater, and the only thing I remember is a bright light, a kind of tunnel, and this beautiful angelic voice that spoke to me." Karen stopped, looking intensely at her husband. "Michael, it was the same voice." "Well, what did it say? You mean the exact words?" "Yeah." Karen smiled wide, her eyes sparkling in the moonlight. "It never used words, only meaning. It's like music playing in your head. No words, just angelic understanding." Karen started walking again and even picked up the pace. Michael fell in line behind her. "It just seems strange that we are being summoned to a clearing where people died on the anniversary of our Savior's death. And in the middle of the night. I don't have that answer, Michael, but I do know that all will be revealed and that Enoch will give us a purpose, real purpose for both of us. As my husband, you must walk with me on this path to God's greater glory," Karen said as they emerged from the woods into Kettleman's clearing. The clearing was about 100 yards in diameter, with all that remained of the Kettleman's house, a concrete foundation resting almost dead center. Arising from the foundation were 2 fire-scarred brick chimneys. Karen moved quickly over to the remnants of the Kettleman's house as Michael suspiciously looked around. They came together again in the center of the foundation, approximately where the Kettleman's kitchen and dining room used to be. "What now?" Michael said. "I don't know." Michael was a bit surprised at Karen's sudden uncertainty. Up until then, she had been so positive about everything. But before Michael could respond, they both heard a twig snap in the distance. Spinning on his heel, Michael whirled around and peered into the darkness. Karen pointed the flashlight in the direction of Michael's gaze. "You heard that, right?" Michael said with a slight tremble. "Yes. What was it?" More twigs snapping and the shuffling of feet could now be heard. It seemed to be coming from the woods on the opposite side of their entrance. It was getting louder. It was coming closer. "Can you see anything?" Michael said. "No. God, Michael, what is it?" "I don't know." Michael thought about looking around for a weapon, but suddenly something started to take form in the darkness. It lumbered under great weight and was having difficulty moving through the thicket. On either side of the robust silhouette were two smaller creatures crawling through the woods, sometimes on all fours and at other times walking erect. "Is this Enoch?" Michael said. Karen aimed the flashlight at the forms. "It can't be." "Hello," came the voice of a middle-aged woman. Looking back, they could see the stout figure of a woman with two children in tow emerging from the woods. Karen squinted for a moment. "It's Ann Carson and her two boys." "Who?" "Ann Carson. She plays the organ at our church." Attending an evangelical church the size of the one Michael and Karen went to made it impossible to know every member. They recognized most and knew more than half by name, but knew less than a quarter personally. Anne was not one Michael knew personally. Karen lit the path with a flashlight for the new arrivals as they moved toward the foundation. Michael helped the round woman up and escorted them to where Karen stood. The conversation was fast. Karen and Michael learned that Anne had had the same dreams and received the same instruction. And like Karen, she believed the message to be from the new prophet, Enoch. "I brought my boys along because, well, I couldn't leave them home alone. What would the Lord think of me then?" She smiled through pudgy cheeks. "I just wish I had thought enough ahead to bring a flashlight." Michael looked down at the two boys who could not be older than 8 or 10. They looked tired and confused. Tromping through the woods in the dark had rattled them a bit, but they were unharmed. Michael looked over at Karen and saw that she was focused towards the woods where Anne had emerged. Those woods were a bit thicker than the ones they had come through, but she could see the soft lights bouncing up and down. In a few minutes, people began to emerge. Michael glanced over at Karen, noticing that her face had lost a bit of its sparkle. It was the kind of thing that only a husband would notice. He moved over and put his arm around her. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" she whispered back. "I could see it on your face. You thought you were the only one, the chosen one." "That would be selfish. God punishes the selfish," Karen said as Michael searched for something encouraging to say. "The Lord needs many shepherds to tend his flock, and you are so lucky to have been chosen to be one." Karen smiled and embraced her husband as the first of the newcomers stepped up onto the blackened foundation. It was an amazing assemblage of individuals. Only the most righteous and God-fearing representing several different faiths had been summoned. There was Father Mitchell from Our Lady of the Divine Embrace, and Rabbi Gordon from the town's only synagogue. The Nation of Islam was represented with Mr. and Mrs. Nashiri. 28 in all had assembled, either by the heavenly voice or by association to someone who had heard it. Conversations moved through the small crowd like a snake through the grass. I thought that when I heard the calling for the first time as a teenager, I had been touched by the hand of God, but it was never so clear as it was when I heard the voice of Enoch, Father Mitchell said. Sounds of acknowledgement moved around the group. "For once, I agree with Father Mitchell," Rabbi Gordon said, while smiling at his good friend and theological rival for the town's soul. "There is no question that Yahweh speaks through Enoch and has brought us to this place." "Glory be to God," someone said from the back. "But why?" Michael said, stepping away from Karen. "I mean, how can we be certain?" Faces, only illuminated by flashlights, looked at Michael as if he had just said something blasphemous. Karen stepped in front of him. "Forgive him. He did not hear Enoch's voice. I did." Expressions of understanding moved through the group, and Father Mitchell spoke to Michael. "We have all received the calling, and it told us our true purpose is going to be revealed, a purpose that will be for the glory of God. And since you are here, I'm sure that the Lord's prophet Enoch wants you to do his bidding as well." Father Mitchell seemed to be taking over the group, something Michael knew he was accustomed to doing. "Everyone," he began, "as the Lord's chosen ones, let us join hands and pray." With excitement, everyone formed a circle, grasping the hands of those on either side. Karen looked at Michael and smiled. "It won't be long now. I can feel it." Before Father Mitchell had finished the prayer, a ray of light descended from the night sky, illuminating the center of the human circle. Father Mitchell continued to lead the prayer, even though many in the group were no longer bowing their heads. Most looked up to the heavens, where the clouds, so thick a minute ago, were now parting like the Red Sea. Gasps of excitement exploded as the golden ray of circular light began to expand, moving toward the chosen ones. In the span of a moment, the heavenly glow had engulfed them all, feeling warm and inviting. Before the chosen ones could fully enjoy the warmth, a new sensation started. Michael felt a tingling deep in his gut, followed immediately by a pulling sensation running along the frame of his body. His eyes widened as he saw those on the other side of the circle begin to rise. He had to look down before he would believe that his feet had also left the ground. The circle was rising. Michael could tell by the panicked expression around him that the cold realization was beginning to sink in. They had all become willing marionettes who knew very little about the puppet master. Terror started to spread, and the circle severed in a dozen places. Michael felt Karen pulling herself to him, seizing both his hands. "It's going to be all right, Michael. Just have faith," Karen smiled. "Have faith." Michael tried to relax and could only think of one thing to say. "I love you," he said as they continued to drift heavenward. Michael breathed deep, letting the power of Karen's faith hold them together. Just after dawn, Ann Carson's two boys drifted out of unconsciousness as thick morning fog glided through Kettleman's clearing. The older of the two got to his feet first, stumbled slightly, then righted himself. Seeing his younger sibling struggling to sit up, he bent down and said, "Are you all right?" The younger boy wiped his eyes. "I think so. Where's Mama?" The oldest looked around. It was only then that he realized that they were all alone. "I don't know," he said. "Come on, get up." As the two made their way back through the woods from which they had come, the youngest boy asked, "Do you think God didn't want us? Were we bad?" Chief Operations Officer Relic swam along the main corridor of the Inox survey and exploratory vessel as it prepared to break away from the remote solar system's gravitational pull. The staff meeting he called was the final piece of administration he had to do before they started the long journey home, and he was eager to get past it. He swam through the hard water door and entered the briefing room. He took his place on a piece of furniture that served as a chair for his species and brought a webbed tentacle down on the table, bringing the meeting to order. The dozen or so attendees went through the topics systematically, and within minutes they had reached the final points on the agenda. The topic of secured inventory rounded out the meeting, and when it came to the final supply brought on board, Relic showed growing interest. In a language resembling whale song, Relic said, "How did the automated herding system function?" "Very well," Supply Officer Bellio said. "I think with some minor adjustments, it will be a real asset to deep space exploration. We were able to herd 28 medium-sized brain bipeds to a remote location and secure them without disrupting the environment." "Interesting," Rollick said with some genuine regard. "I'm still not very clear on how it works." "It analyzes a civilization, and based on the findings, it crafts a message that, in this case, the bipeds would find so alluring they would not even question it. I imagine the message will vary from planet to planet. After a time, the message becomes a beacon, and this herds the animals to a specific location," Ballio said. "Fascinating." Relic glanced down at his data shell. "But I see a discrepancy in your haul. You said you herded 28 bipeds, but only 26 were taken aboard." "Even in this remote end of the galaxy, we are still bound by the Harvesting of Alien Species Limitations Act," Ballio said, his translucent eyes shifting around the room. 2 of the animals were underweight, most likely due to age. They were thrown back. Sounds of disapproval moved through the room as Relic raised a tentacle. Now, it is reasonable to have harvesting limitations. If there weren't, then there might not be enough bipeds for the next Inox who came this way. We have 26 healthy adult animals, which should last us till we reach Albin 5. Now, speaking of dinner, when will they be ready? Should be soon, Balio said. I saw several of the animals being deboned in the galley on my swim over. Excellent, Relic rubbed a tentacle over 3 of his 6 stomachs. I'm so hungry, I could eat one of my wives.
Astounding thrills, hard-boiled action, and spicy chills. You'll find them all and much, much more in Dial P for Pulp. Dial P for Pulp, the only podcast for fans of the pulps. News, reviews, essays, and fiction brought to a web page near you every month. Whether it's Doc Savage, Conan the Barbarian, The Shadow, or Tarzan, you'll find them in Dial P for Pulp.
For more information, visit dialpforpulp.com.
And now, here's a quick mini-story. We did run this as a promo way back when we were just starting out, but not too many people have heard it, so we thought we'd give it another spin. It's an untitled piece, written by Kevin Colligan, and read by Andy Hall.
As he ordered the warship toward the blue planet, the bishop tried to force the memory from his mind. Yet the conversation kept coming back to him. "You must truly know our Father before carrying out the mission," rasped the pontiff. "I've devoted my life to studying our Holy Father, Your Eminence," the bishop replied, painfully earnest. "I know everything. You know nothing." How right the pontiff had been. How little he had known. How much he had preferred it that way. The Holy Father, the all-powerful being who had created life on the home planet, was, in reality, a bungling technician. Worse, he wasn't the glorified vision of their race as depicted in countless works of art. His proud thorax with its sinewy legs and graceful wings, his powerful yet peaceable mouthparts, the ethereal sheen of his impenetrable exoskeleton, were all nothing but artful fabrications. Father was a soft, pink, hairless ape. Nothing, thought the bishop, could be further from the omniscient God he worshipped, or had worshipped before that devastating conversation, than a long-dead human rotting in the thin crust of planet Earth. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Centuries before the near extinction of the humans, their most powerful and warlike tribe took a few halting steps toward interplanetary exploration. Human scientists built machines which were cast out into the void to gather data on other worlds. Original records from the period show that the Holy Father worked for those scientists in a facility dubbed the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at a long-forgotten university called the California Institute of Technology. He was not a brilliant scientist, nor even a particularly exceptional human being. He was a third-tier sterilization specialist named Darren Whitlow. His job was to clean the machines sent into space, to strip them of any stray bits of bacteria, DNA, or other organic material, dead or alive, so as not to pollute other worlds with earthly life. His failure was our genesis. The bishop's mandibles snapped furiously as his warship entered Earth's orbit. Had humanity not rebounded, had they not resumed their rudimentary space exploration, had they not become a small but real threat to his race, he might never have learned the awful truth. "Arm the weapon," hissed the bishop, a small tear welling inside his inner eyelid.
That'll do it for this episode. Remember that we distribute these files on a Creative Commons license, so feel free to share them, burn them, do whatever you like, but please don't modify them and don't profit from them. If you'd like to support Well-Told Tales, please tell your friends about us, blog about us, stumble upon us, dig us, Reddit us, or even send us a small donation to help pay our writers. Thanks so much.